Have you ever had everything feel like too much? Not just because one thing went wrong, but because too many things were asking something of you all at once? That's where I found myself this summer. And today I want to talk about that overwhelm and what it looks like at this stage of life and what helped me step back and breathe again. There are times in life when it feels like everything presses in at once. Not one big dramatic thing, just a lot of smaller things that pile up until you realize you're carrying more than you should, and nothing is bringing satisfaction anymore. That's where I found myself recently. I'd been working towards going to an Appaloosa show. It was out of state, but oddly enough, it was the closest one mileage-wise. The goal wasn't ribbons. It was breed association points for Jewel, something concrete, something to work toward. I had decided that even if I was unable to ride due to my foot, I could still show her in some halter classes and gain points that way. And then, without any warning or any explanation, it was canceled. And this show had been taking place for 40-some years. So I was kind of blown away by the whole thing. When you're younger, you brush things like that off more easily. You regroup, you make a new plan, you push forward. But as we get older, these cancellations hit differently. And in my case, the last 2 years I hadn't shown at all for a lot of reasons. So this really kind of took the wind out of me, especially when you're already adapting and compromising just to get there. I also have to remind myself, more often than I'd like, that I can't do the same amount of physical work I once did. For years, I kept massive gardens and took on everything that went with them: planting, weeding, harvesting, canning, preserving, dehydrating, and everything. I love that work, and part of me still thinks I should be able to do it all. This year, though, it added to the overwhelm instead of grounding me. Add in a remodeling project or two around the house, which I seemed to take on without much hesitation, and suddenly my body was asking for a reckoning that my mind hadn't caught up with yet. Looking back, I also think some of my exhaustion came from a horse trailer remodel that I took on very early in the spring. I spent many weeks building a small camper of sorts in the front of the trailer, trying to create a place where I could sleep and stay comfortably at shows. It was something I felt I needed in order to keep doing what I love. And at that time, it made perfect sense. But it was physical, demanding work done before the season had even really begun. And although it was very satisfying and turned out well, I don't think I fully accounted for how much energy that project alone would take, or how it would ripple into everything else I was trying to manage. At the same time, I was dealing with a foot injury that made riding painful. Keeping my foot in the stirrup hurt. Not uncomfortable, painful. I was waiting on a decision about a possible surgery, trying to weigh what that would mean. And that's where reality sets in. A long layup, weeks off my feet, limited mobility. And that's not something to consider lightly when you have animals who depend on you every single day. Horses and dogs don't understand recovery timelines. They still need feeding, care, and consistency. Eventually, I realized that surgery just wasn't an option for me right now, not because I didn't want relief, but because the cost was too high in other ways. So, when riding became too painful, I wore my muck boots, which didn't touch the hurting part of my foot, and worked with Jewel on the ground. Quiet things, thoughtful things. I taught her to lay down on command. No pressure, no agenda, just communication and trust. And it reminded me of something important. Progress doesn't always look like forward motion. Sometimes it looks like deepening what you already have. But then came the outside pressure. friends pushing me to ride anyway, to aim for another show in September, to force myself to keep going. The next show would be right around the time my grandchild was due to be born, a child that's been very much hoped and prayed for, and I so wanted to be near to greet her when she entered the world. And suddenly, I felt pulled in every direction: horses, family, expectations, timing, responsibilities, all at once. The stress piled up, and that's when I just stopped. I turned Jewel out in the pasture with her friends. I didn't make a big announcement about it. I didn't explain myself. I just let her go be a horse for a while. And then I sat. I literally sat and breathed in summer and flowers and grass. I played with my 3 rescue dogs, or just sat with them. I puttered around in my garden and greenhouse. Nothing rushed, nothing urgent. I put my hands in the dirt. I started a small fall garden in my raised beds out back. No deadlines, no pressure to finish anything. I let myself slow down without guilt. And that's something many of us struggle with, especially as seniors. We've spent a lifetime being productive, responsible, reliable, taking up the slack when other people just don't follow through. We're used to pushing through our discomfort, putting others first, and meeting expectations. There just comes a time to relax and let yourself rest. Most likely, you have earned it many times over. But overwhelm doesn't always mean you're weak or giving up. Sometimes it's your body and your spirit asking you to listen. One of the hardest lessons I'm learning and relearning is not allowing other people to determine how I feel or act. That doesn't mean shutting people out. For me, it means turning inward, listening to that quiet inner voice, the one that knows when something is too much, when it's time to pause, and when rest is not laziness, but wisdom instead. As we get older, we have a lifetime of experience stored inside us. We've earned the right to trust our gut instincts, to choose what feels sustainable instead of what looks impressive. Overwhelm doesn't always need to be fixed. Sometimes it just needs to be acknowledged, honored, and given space. For me, that space looked like sitting in the sun, garden time, soil under my nails, slower days, and permission to step back without an apology. If you're feeling overwhelmed right now, pulled in too many directions, pressured by well-meaning people, or disappointed by plans that didn't work out, I hope you'll hear this. You're allowed to choose the pace that keeps you well. You're allowed to rest. You're allowed to change course. And you don't owe anyone an explanation for listening to your own inner wisdom. Sometimes the most important progress we make is simply learning to breathe and when to let it go. Thanks so much for watching. Please check out my other videos. Bye for now.